She pretended to be with a man to scare off her ex, not knowing he was the mafia boss. The rain in Orpheum Harbor doesn't just fall, it attacks. It hits the slick cobblestones of the seawall with a fury, turning the neon glow of the wharf into a bleeding watercolor. Reds and electric blues drip down the pavement, and I was running right through them. My name is Mara Ellison. By day, I'm the hand that paints the crisp gold leaf lettering on the windows of Gable and Ink. By night, I'm the surgeon who recovers lost data from the dead hard drives of bar owners and bookies. Tonight, I was just prey. Behind me, Trent Geller was yelling my name. "Mara, Mara, wait up, don't walk away from me." His voice was a familiar kind of poison, part wine, part threat. Trent was the man I'd spent 6 months trying to scrub from my life, a boardwalk foreman with a snake smile and fists that clenched too easily. He was violence and bad debts wrapped in a cheap leather jacket, and he always smelled faintly of brine and stale beer. My breath hitched, fogging in the cold air. I couldn't go back to my apartment. He'd be there, waiting, kicking the door until the neighbors complained or the wood splintered. I needed cover. I needed light and people. Ahead, the entrance to Club Vellum glowed like a sanctuary. I didn't think. I just moved. I shoved through the heavy oak door, spilling into a wave of warmth, low jazz, and the smell of expensive whiskey. The club was all dark wood, polished brass, and mirrors that reflected the dim lighting, making the room feel infinite. It was a place I serviced, not a place I visited. My work boots skidded slightly on the polished floor. Trent was right behind me. The door swung open again, letting in the howl of the wind. "There you are. Thought you could just run." Panic, cold and sharp, seized my throat. I scanned the room, desperate. My eyes landed on a man sitting alone at the bar. He was a statue carved from shadow. His back was straight, encased in a black suit so perfectly tailored it seemed less like clothing and more like a second skin, and he was staring into a glass of amber liquid, but his stillness was predatory. He wasn't relaxing. He was holding court over the empty space around him. I had no choice. It was a gamble that could get me thrown out or slapped. I took it. I rushed forward, my steps faltering, and hooked my arm through his. The fabric of his suit was impossibly smooth, the muscle beneath it unyielding as granite. He didn't flinch, but I felt the coiled energy in him, the sudden sharp intake of air. "Honey!" I yelled, pitching my voice high and bright, forcing a tremor of fake adoration into it. I leaned into his side, pressing my rain-soaked coat against his arm. "I'm so sorry I'm late. I got held up." Trent stopped dead 5 feet away. His face, slick with rain, twisted in confusion, then darkened. "What the hell is this? Who is this guy?" "Mara." The man beside me turned his head, slowly. It wasn't a sudden movement, it was a deliberate calibration. His eyes, when they met mine, were not brown or blue. They were the color of steel, flat and sharp and cold, like the harbor water under a winter sky. They held my gaze for a solid, unnerving second, taking in my fear, my lie, and the man advancing on us. Then, he did something I didn't expect. He accepted the role. He didn't speak. He simply shifted his weight, a subtle movement that brought his body partially in front of mine. It was an instinctive act of shielding. Then, his hand, large, clean, unadorned, came to rest on the small of my back. It wasn't a grab or a caress. It was a statement, a claim. The warmth of his palm seeped through my thin blouse, a steady, solid pressure that anchored me. Trent saw the gesture. He saw the suit, the confidence, the absolute lack of fear in the man's eyes. Trent, who lived by a code of bluster and intimidation, recognized something superior. He faltered, his aggressive stance deflating just slightly. "I asked you a question," Trent stammered, his bully courage failing him. The stranger finally looked at Trent. His gaze was utterly dismissive, as if studying an insect. He smiled, but it was just a faint tightening at the corner of his mouth, devoid of all humor. He turned back to the bar, picked up a second glass that sat untouched, and slid it across the polished wood toward me. It was more whiskey. "If I'm the fake boyfriend," he said, his voice a low, quiet rumble that cut through the club's noise, meant only for me. "Does that mean you're safe?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications I couldn't begin to understand. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod toward the entrance. Instantly, two thick-necked men in dark suits materialized from the shadows near the door. I hadn't even noticed them. They moved on Trent, one grabbing each of his arms. "Hey, get your hands off me!" Trent shrieked, his bravado evaporating into raw panic. "This is a private club," one of the guards grunted. "You can't do this, Mara," Trent struggled, his eyes wild, fixed on me. "You think this is over? You tell him about the cargo at Pier 19. You know what's on that drive? I'll come for it. Mara, I'll set you straight, you hear me?" They dragged him out the door and tossed him back into the storm. The door clicked shut, sealing us back in the warm, quiet dark. The silence that followed was deafening. My entire body was shaking. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving me weak-kneed. I pulled my arm from the stranger's, stepping back. The heat from his hand vanished, leaving my back cold. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry. He's my ex. I didn't know what else to do. I'll go." I turned to leave, fumbling for the strap of my bag. A sound stopped me, a quiet click. From the back of the bar, near a service door, a flash of white light illuminated a figure for half a second. Someone had just taken our picture. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't Trent. This was something else. The stranger didn't turn around. His steel-gray eyes were locked on the large mirror behind the bar, which reflected the entire room. He tracked the movement of the person disappearing through the service exit, his expression utterly flat, unreadable. He had seen it. He had known, perhaps even before I did, that this was more than just a domestic dispute I dragged him into. He turned back to me, his gaze analytical. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and produced a business card, holding it between two fingers. It was thick, heavy cardstock, matte black with embossed silver lettering. It said Terranova Logistics, Graybridge. Nothing else, no name, no title, just a company and a location. I didn't know the name. I didn't know the gray brick monolith of a building it belonged to in the industrial sector, nor the silent empire it commanded the North Shore Syndicate. I just knew it felt dangerous. "You should go," he said, his voice still that quiet, controlled rumble. "But he will be back, and now they have a picture." I took the card. My fingers brushed his. His skin was warm. "Thank you. Adolfo Terranova." I'd read the name on the card. A flicker of surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to read it so fast. "Mara Ellison," I offered, not knowing why. He nodded once. "Go. Take the front door. Walk quickly." I did. I pushed back out into the rain, clutching the card in my fist. The air felt colder now, the harbor night more menacing. I pulled my collar tight and started walking, my boots clicking rapidly on the wet pavement. I made it half a block before I felt it, the crawl on the back of my neck. I glanced over my shoulder. Across the street, parked in the shadow of a warehouse, was a black sedan. Its headlights were off. It wasn't Trent's truck. As I watched, it pulled silently from the curb, keeping its distance, its dark windows reflecting the bleeding neon. I wasn't just running from Trent anymore. I looked up, mounted on the rain-slicked awning of the building I was passing. A red light glowed on a street-level security camera. It was pointed right at me, its lens zeroed in. I froze, caught in its mechanical gaze, the rain plastering my hair to my face. I thought of the flash in the bar, of my face pressed close to Adolfo Terranova's. I had a terrible, sinking feeling that the camera was recording, capturing the image of a terrified girl and the city's most powerful shadow, binding us together in a single, fatal frame. I had run from a storm and straight into a hurricane. The next morning, the rain had subsided into a cold, gray drizzle that matched my mood. I was hunched over my work table at Gable and Ink. The smell of turpentine and oil paints usually a comfort. But today, it just soured in my stomach. I hadn't slept. The image of the black sedan and the cold steel of Adolfo Terranova's eyes were burned into my mind. Just after 9, a courier in a crisp, unfamiliar uniform knocked on the glass door. He handed me a padded envelope, marked with an official-looking logo, Port Guardians Authority. Mara Ellison. That's me. He had me sign a digital pad and left. I tore it open. Inside were 2 things. The first was a thick stack of $100 bills. I counted it twice, $5,000. The second was a single typed sheet. It was titled, Compensation Payment. It was a bizarre, formal request. No, a demand to permanently delete all security footage and data logs from my work for Club Vellum from the previous night, citing a minor electrical surge that required a system-wide reset. It was signed by a deputy director, Velas. This was wrong, all wrong. The Port Guardians Authority handled shipping manifests and tariffs. They didn't pay bar technicians in cash to erase footage. This was a bribe, or a warning. $5,000 was a king's ransom for a few hours of corrupted files I hadn't even recovered yet. Before I could process the envelope, my phone buzzed on the workbench, a text from an unknown number. My heart stopped. It was a photo. The one from the bar. It was grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Me, rain-soaked and terrified, looking up at Adolfo Terranova. His hand was on my back, claiming me. We were frozen in that moment, a tableau of protector and protected. Below the image, a single line of text from Trent. Meet me at Cold Storage 7 tonight. 8 o'clock. Bring the drive, or you and your new boyfriend will find out what happens when you mess with my business. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone. It clattered against a set of pigment jars. Cold Storage 7. Pier 19. Mara, you look like you just saw a ghost that owes you money. Lena was standing in the doorway, a steaming mug in each hand. She was my partner at the shop, my best friend, and the only person who knew the full, ugly story of Trent. She set a mug in front of me. I just pushed the phone and the envelope toward her. Lena read the text first, her brow furrowing. Then she saw the cash. $5,000 from the Port Authority to delete. Oh, Mara. Last night wasn't just Trent, was it? I told her everything. The chase, the club, the stranger, his hand on my back, the flash of the camera, the black sedan that followed me home. I finished by showing her the minimalist black card. Terra Nova Logistics, Lena said, holding the card by its edges. She whistled, low and long. Graybridge. Mara, this isn't just some suit. I've heard whispers about this name from clients at the docks. This is serious weight. She looked from the card to the threatening text. You know, this might be your answer. What a guy I used as a human shield. A guy who didn't flinch, Lena corrected, tapping the photo. Look at him. He owns that room. He didn't just stop Trent, he had him removed with a look. Guys like Trent are predators, but they only prey on what they think is weaker. This man is not weaker. You need to call him. And say, what hi? The guy you saved me from is threatening to kill me over a hard drive. I dragged him into this. I can't drag him in deeper. He was already in it. Mara, they took his picture too. Remember? Before I could argue, the antique bell above the shop door tinkled. I looked up and my breath caught. It was him, Adolfo Terranova. He stood in the doorway, framed by the gray morning light, in a perfectly cut charcoal wool overcoat. He looked even more imposing than he had in the dark club. He held a small paper bag, and his steel gray eyes found mine instantly. Miss Ellison, he said. His voice was just as I remembered, a low vibration that seemed to settle in my bones. I was in the neighborhood. I thought you might appreciate a coffee. The Larkspur, just up the street. They have the best. Lena's eyes went wide. She gave me a tiny, urgent nod. Yes, okay. My voice was a squeak. I grabbed my coat. The Larkspur was a tiny, steam-filled cafe with copper tables and windows that looked out onto the harbor. It was neutral ground. He found us a corner booth, Private, but in full view. He didn't ask what I wanted. He simply pulled 2 coffees and a pastry from the bag. He sat opposite me, not crowding, not looming. He just watched me for a moment as I unwrapped my hands from my cold mug. "You were followed home," he stated. "It wasn't a question." I nodded, swallowing. A black sedan, no plates I could see. And then this morning, I pushed the Port Guardian's envelope across the table, followed by my phone. He didn't touch the money. He read the letter, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at the photo on my phone, his gaze lingering on it for a long second. He read Trent's threat. "Cold storage 7, he murmured, more to himself than to me. He looked up, his eyes sharp. "What is on the drive, Mara?" He asked it gently. There was no judgment, no accusation, just a need for facts. While he waited for my answer, his eyes lifted, not at me, but at the reflection in the window behind my head. His gaze was casual, sweeping the street, but it was too deliberate. I saw his eyes narrow, just slightly. He was watching the reflection of the street. He tracked a man in a brown trench coat who walked past the cafe, then paused at the corner to check his phone. "I don't know, exactly," I finally admitted, my voice low. "Trent used to be a dock foreman. He was always running small scams, skimming cargo. But about 8 months ago, he got in deep. He owed money, a lot of it. To whom? A group he called the Alder Ring. He said they were new, that they were moving fast, muscling in on the old crews. He got fired, and he came to me with a hard drive. It was water damaged. Totally fried. He was frantic. Said he just needed to pull one file, a fail-safe. He said it was his insurance." Adolfo's gaze flicked back to the window. The man in the brown coat was still there, now pretending to read a newspaper. He'd looped the block, a stranger's jacket sleeve, seen 3 times in 5 minutes. "You recovered the data," Adolfo said. "I tried. I got fragments, corrupted manifests, shipping logs, fragments of code. It didn't make any sense, but I kept the drive. Trent got violent, and I threw him out. I held on to it because I was afraid of what was on it, and I was afraid of him." Adolfo leaned forward. The space between us suddenly felt charged, electric. The Alder Ring isn't new. Not really, they're parasites. They use extortion and data theft. They don't have the muscle, so they use leverage. That drive is their leverage, or perhaps it's the evidence against them. He gestured to the phone. "Trent isn't acting alone. He's a desperate man being squeezed. They are using him to get the drive, and now they are using you." "What do I do?" I whispered. "Give it to them." "No," he said, his voice firm. "They won't let you walk away. They have your face. They have my face. They believe we are partners." He paused, a calculated silence. "So, we will let them." "What?" "Trent and this Alder Ring. They operate on fear. We need to create distance. The best way to do that is to make them believe you are under my protection. Publicly. They will hesitate to move on you if they believe you belong to me." The implications of his words hung thick in the air. Belong to him. He was offering to continue the charade from the bar, to build a wall around me made of his own reputation, a reputation I was beginning to understand was terrifying. "You do that, why?" I asked. "You don't even know me." "They put my face in their game," he said simply, as if that explained everything. "That is not a mistake they get to make twice. And you were running from a man who wanted to hurt you. I do not abide that." I looked down at my hands. It was insane, but it was also the only lifeline I'd been thrown. "Okay," I said, my voice barely audible. "Okay." A small, almost imperceptible tension left his shoulders. He reached across the table, not to take my hand, but to adjust his own cufflink. As he did, the back of his fingers brushed the bare skin of my wrist. It was like a static shock. A jolt of pure, unexpected heat shot up my arm, making my heart kick against my ribs. It was harmless, accidental, but it felt more intimate than any touch Trent had ever given me. My breath hitched. I pulled my hand back, hiding my reaction by gripping my coffee mug. He either didn't notice or was polite enough to pretend he hadn't. Good, he said, his voice all business again. Now, a few rules. You may be approached by men claiming to be from the Interstate Integrity Bureau. They will have badges. They will look official. This agency does not exist. It is a front the Alder Ring uses to intimidate businesses. If they come to you, you do not speak to them. You call me. He slid his black card back across the table. His number was now penned on the back in precise, strong handwriting. And Trent? Do not go to Cold Storage 7. I will handle Trent. We left the cafe. The man in the brown coat was gone. The air was still cold, the sky a flat, unforgiving white. As we stood on the sidewalk, a battered blue delivery truck rumbled past. It slowed, and a bundle of flyers was tossed from the passenger window, scattering onto the wet pavement. They were brightly colored, cheaply printed. Orpheum Harbor Street Art Night, one proclaimed, with a graffiti-style graphic. I would have ignored them, but Adolfo stopped. He bent down and picked one up, his eyes scanning the chaotic design. He didn't look at the text. He looked at the symbols, the specific tags painted in the background. His face was a mask, but I saw his jaw tighten. He folded the flyer and slipped it into his overcoat pocket. He recognized something. It wasn't an advertisement. It was a message. Another piece of the puzzle I had unwillingly become. I will be in touch, Mara, he said, his eyes meeting mine. Stay close to your shop. He didn't say goodbye, and he just turned and walked away. A man of purpose moving through a world I was only just beginning to see. The velvet ropes in the lobby of the Lantern were gray with dust, the crystal chandelier dark. This abandoned theater was a monument to a forgotten glamour, a perfect shadow in which to hide a nerve center. I bypassed the rotting orchestra pit and took the service stairs down. Below the stage, the air was warm, smelling of clean electronics and ozone. It was a concrete bunker, lit by the glow of 24 monitors. My team was already there, assembled around the central holographic table. Bishop, my strategist, stood with his arms crossed, his face a permanent scowl. He saw the world as a series of threats to be neutralized. Nix, my operations lead, was a ghost in black. Her fingers already flying across a keyboard, her eyes scanning 3 data streams at once. Cade, my numbers man, sat silently, observing, saying nothing until money moved, and Sable, my internal counsel, held a tablet, her posture as rigid as the legal code she manipulated. They turned as I entered. Nix, without preamble, tapped a key. The photo from the bar materialized on the main screen, floating in the air. Mara, looking up at me, her hand tangled in the fabric of my suit, my own hand resting on her back. It was a damnable, incriminating, and strangely proprietary image. It hit the black market forums an hour ago, Nix said, her voice flat. The timestamp is just after the man in the brown coat left the cafe. They're calling her the asset, or, more poetically, the living vault. The Alder Ring believes she holds their digital ledgers. She holds a damaged drive belonging to her ex-boyfriend, I corrected, my voice sharp. She is a civilian. A civilian they now believe is your new treasurer, Bishop grunted. Sable stepped forward, bringing up a new file. The Interstate Integrity Bureau is confirmed as an Alder Ring shell. They've used it 3 times this quarter to extort data from import-export businesses. The compensation given to Miss Ellison this morning was their attempt to retrieve the bar footage of her and you, under the guise of the Port Guardians. They are sloppy or arrogant. Both. I said, I looked at the image of Mara, her eyes. I saw the fear I'd seen in the club. Now, because of me. That fear would be magnified 1,000 times. Rule Ember is in effect, I declared. The room went very still. She's not to be touched. She's not to be used, leveraged, or endangered. All operations will be structured to shield her from blowback. She's not a piece on the board. She is the civilian we protect. Is that clear? Nods from all of them, even Bishop. The problem, Bishop said, changing the feed to a live map of the harbor, is that she might be the key, whether she likes it or not. He highlighted Pier 19. The containers are playing a shell game, swapping ID codes in real time. routing through ghost manifests. It's how they're moving the contraband. The algorithm is clever. Nix cut in. I cross-referenced her professional history. Mara Ellison holds a minor patent for a specific data recovery technique, one designed to reassemble fragmented, overwritten, or saltwater corrupted code. She brought up 2 windows. On one, the jumbled code from the Alder Rings manifests. On the other, a page from Mara's 2-year-old patent filing. It's a digital signature, and I murmured, seeing it, the way they swap the codes, it's based on her recovery method. She's the only one who can put the pieces together, Nix confirmed. She's not just a living vault, boss. She's the only one who can open it. This changed things. This made her a target for extraction, not just intimidation. Let me handle it, Bishop said, his voice dropping to a low growl. A simple extraction. Clean, we take Trent, we take the man in the brown coat, we get the drive and destroy it. The girl walks away, never knows what happened. No, I said, too quickly. Violence is loud. Even when it's quiet, it will draw a line straight back to her. They will assume she was in on it, that she gave them up. They will hunt her for the rest of her life. I paced away from the table. We use a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. We create a diversion. I turned to Sable. That asset you have at District Court 14, the one with the gambling debts. Sable raised an eyebrow. He is available. Good, I want a rumor started. A leaked preliminary audit of the Port Guardians Authority, effective immediately. I want them checking their own books, not watching the harbor. I want the Alder Rings contacts inside the port to panic. Let them chase a legal ghost. A financial feint, Cade said, speaking for the first time. It will work, for a time. We only need a window, I said. I looked at Nix. She anticipated me. Boss, I need 48 hours. You have 24, I countered. She didn't blink. Pier 19 is a maze, but they handed us the map. She brought up the flyer I'd picked up. The street art night, they're using this as a meet, a public place to exchange the drive. They expect Trent to bring it, or her. So we will use it as a canvas, I said, understanding. I'll tag every escape route, every sniper's nest, every dead end. I'll layer the tags, using her preferred visual language, the same symbols from her painting portfolio. To them, it's graffiti. To her, it will be a map. It was a solid plan. It was intricate, but it relied on one thing. Her... Leave me in, I said. The room cleared. Bishop was the last to leave, his disapproval a tangible force. The door hissed shut, leaving me alone with the hum of the servers and the floating image of Mara Ellison. I was asking her to walk into a war zone. I was asking her to trust a man she'd met for less than 30 minutes, a man she'd used as a shield. Now, I was offering to be that shield for real. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I had memorized. She picked up on the second ring. Mara, my voice was steady, colder than I intended. Adolfo. Her voice was strained, thin. The flyers you saw, the street art night at the harbor. It's not a party. A sharp silence. I could hear her breathing, the faint sound of the world on her end. It's them. Isn't it the Alder Ring? It's a trap, I said, cutting to the bone. They set it for Trent, but now they expect you. They think you have their ledgers. They think I'm your protection. So, what do we do? Do I run? No, I said. You're done running. We go, tonight, we walk right into their trap and we let them see us. I will be the boyfriend you pretended I was. We will be visible. We will be the bait. I heard the sharp, sudden intake of her breath. It was the sound of someone standing on a precipice, staring down. The sound of pure, crystallized fear. I waited for her to hang up, to break, to tell me I was insane. Okay. The word was quiet, but the fear was gone. In its place was something hard, a sliver of steel that resonated with my own. It was the sound of a woman bracing for a storm, locking her knees and refusing to bend. My respect for her, already present, deepened. I will pick you up at 7, I said. I ended the call. The screen went dark. My reflection stared back at me from the black glass. I saw the lines of my suit, the stillness in my eyes. I saw the man Trent had backed down from. I turned to the dark, empty theater. The ghosts my only witnesses. The harbor was my world. It was cold, deep, and unforgiving. She had, by sheer chance, stepped into it. "You walked into my water," I said, the words of vow spoken to the shadows. "I'll move the entire tide so you don't get your feet wet." The harbor air was sharp, smelling of salt and aerosol paint. The street art night was a controlled explosion of sound. Industrial speakers blasted heavy bass, and the concrete walls of Pier 19 were bathed in shifting spotlights. Crowds milled about, watching artists spray paint massive murals. It was the perfect place to hide in plain sight. Adolfo's hand was warm, resting possessively on the small of my back, just as it had been in the club. But this was different. That was desperation. This was calculation. "Stay close," he murmured, his voice a low vibration against the music. "They're watching, at least 3 of them. Look at the art, not at them." My heart hammered. I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder for a brief, calculated second, trying to look like a girl impressed by her date, not a girl about to walk into a lion's den. His body was rigid, a wall of impeccably dressed muscle. "We need to give Nix the targets," he said, guiding me toward a public participation wall. A row of spray cans was lined up. "She's watching the watchers," Adolfo said, his breath near my ear. "She needs their exact locations. Use the reflective paint, the wave pattern you described." I picked up a can of pearlescent white. My hand was shaking. "They'll see me." "That's the point. They expect you to be an artist. Act like one." I pressed the nozzle. The paint hissed onto the black plywood. I moved my hand in the familiar, rhythmic motion I used for my own sign painting, the interlocking, waving knot design. It was a pattern I had used on my own portfolio, the one Nix had clearly studied. One watcher by the scaffolding, wearing a red hat. I painted the first peak of the wave. Another near the food truck, pretending to be on his phone. I added the second loop. A third, on the gantry above, blending with the riggers. I finished the pattern, a 2-foot square of shimmering white. It looked like stylized water. To Nix, looking through a specific optical filter from the rooftop across the street, it was a map. I had just tagged the alder ring's eyes. We moved on, Adolfo's hand sliding from my back to grip my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. The gesture was so natural, so possessive, it sent another jolt up my arm. As we passed under a dark gantry, they stepped out. 3 men. They wore matching navy blue windbreakers with a cheap, embroidered eagle logo. "Interstate Integrity Bureau," the lead one said, flashing a laminated ID that looked like it came from a cereal box. He was trying to sound official, but his eyes were predatory. "We have reports of illicit materials being exchanged. We need to search your bags." Adolfo didn't tense. If anything, he relaxed. He stepped half a pace in front of me, a subtle, complete shield. A slow, cold smile touched his lips. It was the most terrifying expression I had ever seen. "Do you?" he said, his voice dangerously polite. "And do you have a warrant to accompany those jackets?" "We don't need one, pal. Step aside." The man reached for my bag. A sudden, blinding white light flooded the area. It wasn't just bright. It was a physical assault, a high-powered strobe, aimed directly from the rooftop, flashed on, off, on, off, on, off. The men recoiled, hands flying to their faces, cursing. The crowd yelled in surprise. The music stuttered. "Now," Adolfo said. His grip on my hand tightened, not painfully, but with an absolute finality. He pulled me left, away from the water, toward a narrow, black gap between 2 warehouses. Brass alley. "A little warning next time," I heard a man yell from the shadows. "Bishop." He emerged from the darkness, shoved a heavy rolling dumpster to block the path of the blinded agents, and nodded once at Adolfo. "Nix is cutting the auxiliary power to this section. You have 2 minutes. Go." Adolfo pulled me into the darkness of the alley. It was suddenly quiet, the music muffled to a dull throb. We were running, my boots slipping on wet cardboard, but Adolfo wasn't frantic. He was talking, his voice calm, almost conversational, as if we were strolling. The brickwork in this alley is 19th century Dutch, quite rare for Orpheum Harbor. They used a different mortar. "Are you kidding me?" I panted, pulling against his grip as I stumbled. "Keep your breathing even," he said, never breaking stride, his grip steadying me. "They will be looking for panic. Do not give it to them. You are just a girl on a date," annoyed that the lights went out. We rounded the last bend, the street exit a rectangle of dim light ahead. A figure blocked it. "Mara!" The voice was a raw shriek of terror. "Trent." He was holding a length of rusted pipe, but he was holding it like a shield, not a weapon. His whole body was shaking, his eyes wide and wet in the gloom. "Mara, you weren't supposed to—" "He's here. They're here." He looked past me, terrified of who was behind us. Then he looked at Adolfo, and his fear doubled. He was trapped between two monsters. Adolfo stopped. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't draw a weapon. He just dropped my hand and stood, looking at Trent. The silence in the alley was absolute, broken only by Trent's ragged gasps. "You have 5 seconds to leave," Adolfo said, his voice flat. "She has my drive. I need it. They told me to get it," Trent sobbed, raising the pipe with trembling arms. 5, Adolfo said, taking one slow, deliberate step forward. Trent stumbled back. "They'll kill me. You don't understand." 4, another step. Adolfo's hands were at his sides, perfectly relaxed. He was an executioner offering a choice. Trent's eyes darted from Adolfo's face to the alley entrance behind him. He was a rat in a trap, and Adolfo was the steel. 3. Trent let out a strangled cry. The pipe clanged loudly on the concrete, ringing in the narrow space. He threw something at my feet, a small plastic rectangle. Then he turned and fled, scrambling out of the alley and disappearing into the night. I bent down, my hand shaking, and picked it up. It was a key card, white, generic, with a magnetic stripe, but stamped in the corner was a sequence of numbers, CS7 and a long alphanumeric string. I stared at it. My data recovery instincts kicked in. It wasn't just a random string. It was a checksum, a digital fingerprint. I had seen it before. It was the verification code from the fragmented, corrupted shipping logs on Trent's hard drive. "This is it," I whispered, looking up at Adolfo. "The drive I have. It's the index, this card. This is the lock. This is for cold storage 7. This is the key to the whole chain." Adolfo took the card from my numb fingers, his eyes scanning it before pocketing it. A loud boom echoed from the harbor, followed by cheers. The music swelled, the lights flashed back on. We stepped out of the alley, back into the artificial party. A confetti cannon had fired, raining silver and blue streamers over the crowd. We blended back in, just 2 more faces in the chaos. Adolfo didn't let me go. He turned me to face him, his hands coming up to cup my face, his thumbs brushing the rain-damp hair from my temples. His expression was intense, his steel eyes searching mine, checking for cracks. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, the casual tone gone. I think so," I stammered. The warmth of his hands, the sudden, focused intimacy was more dizzying than the strobe light. My heart was doing a frantic drum solo against my ribs. Click! It was the sound of a camera shutter. Close, too close. Adolfo's eyes snapped up. Looking past my shoulder, I turned. A man in a dark hoodie was lowering a camera with a long lens. He was on the edge of the crowd, maybe 40 feet away. He grinned, raised the camera, and took another shot. The flash obvious this time. Adolfo's hands dropped from my face. He didn't move. He just watched the man melt back into the crowd. "That wasn't Alder Ring," I said, my voice shaking again. "Their guys were in the blue jackets." "No," Adolfo said. His face was granite. He was looking at the reflection of the man in the dark glass of a closed vendor stall. That flash was too bright. It wasn't just to take a picture. It was to be seen. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, turning his cold gaze back to me, that someone wants the alder ring to think I'm making an aggressive move. Someone is painting a target on my back, using you as the brush. He didn't take me to my apartment. He didn't take me to the cold, industrial building in Graybridge. He took me back to the Orpheum, to the abandoned theater. We didn't go into the humming server room he called the Lantern. Instead, he led me up a narrow, winding staircase behind the projectionist's booth, a staircase I never knew existed. He unlocked a heavy wooden door, and we stepped into the theater's attic. It was a sanctuary. The chaos of the harbor, the strobing lights, the cameras, all of it fell away, muffled by old brick and a century of dust. The vast room was angled, following the gabled roof, and the only light came from 3 small amber lamps, casting warm pools of yellow on worn oriental rugs. The entire space smelled of cedar, old paper, and the faint, clean scent of rain. Outside, the storm had returned, but up here, it was a comfort, a fine. Silver thread of rain whispered against the skylights. The old building groaned and settled around us, the sound of wood breathing. I was still shaking, the adrenaline of the alley crash-landing into exhaustion. Adolfo took my damp jacket without a word and draped it over a hook. He disappeared into a shadowed alcove and returned with a thick, heavy black hoodie. It was impossibly soft. "Put this on," he said, his voice quiet. I pulled it over my head, grateful for the warmth. It enveloped me, smelling faintly of him, not cologne, but something cleaner, like crisp air and expensive wool. I huddled on a deep, worn leather sofa, pulling my knees to my chest. He didn't turn on any more lights. He moved to a small, dark kitchenette in the corner. I heard the click of a gas stove, the sound of liquid pouring. A few minutes later, the rich, dark smell of real chocolate filled the room. He came back with 2 heavy ceramic mugs, steam rising in slow curls. He handed one to me and took the armchair opposite, setting his own mug on a low wooden table between us. He didn't sit back. He sat on the edge of the cushion, his body angled toward me, his forearms resting on his knees. He just waited. I gripped the mug, letting the heat sink into my frozen hands. The silence was absolute, broken only by the rain. "I pulled the key card from my pocket," I said, my voice sounding small in the vast room. I had retrieved it from him when we got in the car. I turned it over and over, the plastic clicking faintly against my thumbnail. I could have stopped this months ago. His steel gray eyes, softened by the lamplight, watched my hands. He didn't speak. He just listened. Trent gave me that drive. He was frantic. He said it was his insurance against a group he'd gotten tangled with, the Alder Ring. I tried to recover the files. I took a shaky breath, the steam from the cocoa warming my face. It was mostly corrupted, salt water damage, but I got fragments, shipping manifests that didn't exist, logs for medical equipment being routed to warehouses that I knew were condemned. It was a ghost ledger. I knew it was proof. I stared into the dark liquid. I held on to it. I told myself it was because I was afraid of him, afraid he'd hurt me if I destroyed it. But that wasn't the whole truth. I was also afraid for him, as awful as he was. I thought if I gave this to anyone, he'd go to prison for the rest of his life. I felt responsible. So I just hid it. I did nothing. I looked up, meeting his steady gaze. I let this happen. By trying to protect him, I ended up here, with you, in this. But when I saw him in that alley tonight, so pathetic and terrified, I'm not protecting him anymore. I'm not afraid of him. I just want this to be over. I have to face it. The confession hung in the air, a fragile, ugly thing. Adolfo listened, his expression unreadable, but his focus was absolute. He watched my fingers fidget, watched the card flip over and over. When I finished, he leaned forward, closer still. He didn't reach for me. He didn't offer platitudes. He just placed his right hand on the low table between us, palm up. It was an offering, a simple, steady anchor in the middle of the storm. "If you need a place to stand," he said, his voice a low, soft rumble, stripped of the command he'd had in the alley. "I am here. if you need a way out, if you want to walk away from all of it, I will open that door for you, and no one will ever find you. He was offering me an escape, a clean break from Trent, from the alder ring, from him. I looked at his hand. It was large, the fingers long, the palm warm-looking. It was the hand that had rested on my back, that had shielded me, that had dismissed Trent with a single, silent gesture. It was a hand that could build an empire or destroy one, and it was open. My own hand was trembling. I was so cold. Slowly, I uncurled my fingers from my mug. I reached out. The last few inches felt like crossing a canyon. My fingertips, icy and small, touched the center of his palm. His skin was warm, impossibly warm. A jolt went through me, but it wasn't the static shock of the cafe. It was a slow, deep current of heat. I let my hand rest there. He didn't close his fingers, didn't grab, didn't claim. He just let me hold on. I felt my breath, tight and shallow in my chest, finally release. I felt his own breathing catch. Just for a second, the air in the room, already thick with rain and chocolate, grew heavy. Neither of us moved. I watched his throat as he swallowed. He was looking at my mouth. He leaned in, his gaze never leaving mine. I didn't pull back. I met him halfway. His lips brushed mine. It was the softest touch I had ever known. It wasn't a kiss, it was a question. It was just the barest, lightest pressure a test. He tasted of the night air, of strength, and faintly of the dark chocolate. He pulled back, only an inch. His eyes, no longer steel, but a dark, smoky gray, searched mine. He was asking, wordlessly, not demanding, not taking. He was giving me the choice. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. Trent had only ever taken... I closed the distance. I leaned in that final inch and pressed my mouth to his. The warmth was immediate. It was slow and deep and devastatingly gentle. It was a kiss of absolute reassurance. His other hand came up, not to my face, but to the back of my neck, his fingers threading into the damp hair at my nape. His touch was so light, but it sent a shiver down my entire spine. My own hand, the one in his, finally curled, my fingers gripping his. It was a quiet exploration, a discovery. It was the smell of the rain, the warmth of the room, the taste of chocolate. It was a world away from the violence of the harbor. We stayed there for a long, slow moment, an anchor in the storm, a safe harbor. It was the furthest thing from danger I had ever felt. I was the one who pulled away, slowly, resting my forehead against his shoulder. My body was thrumming. I hid my face in the soft fabric of his hoodie. "I have to tell you," I whispered, my voice muffled. "That night, at the club, I grabbed you. I pretended you were mine, just to escape Trent." I lifted my head, forcing myself to meet his intense gaze. "But right now, with you, I don't want to pretend anymore." A flicker of something powerful moved behind his eyes. He squeezed my hand. "There is no rush," he said, his voice a deep, rough promise. "The storm is still blowing. When it's over, then we can say the big words." I let out a shaky laugh, a sound of pure relief. I was safe. For the first time in a year, I was truly, completely safe. I glanced past his shoulder. Out the tall, arched window at the city, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Across the water, the neon sign for the Club Vellum, which had been dark, flickered to life. It glowed blue, then it went dark. It glowed blue again. Then it pulsed, twice, went dark, and pulsed twice again, a pattern. Adolfo's head turned. He had seen it too. The tenderness in his expression vanished, replaced in an instant by the sharp, focused energy of the commander. He stood, pulling me up with him, his hand still holding mine. The quiet moment was over. "Nix," he said, his voice all steel once more. "She's traced the container line." The signal from Nix was our map. The pulsing blue light was a breadcrumb trail of hacked streetlights and compromised junction boxes, leading us away from the main harbor and into the refrigerated district. Cold Storage 7 was a mountain of white-painted steel, looming in the darkness. Humming with the sound of 1,000 refrigeration units, the air smelled of diesel and frozen fish. I was no longer Mara the artist. I was Mara the technician. Dressed in a faded blue North Star County Utilities jumpsuit Adolfo had provided. The ID badge on my chest was a work of art. The lamination was perfect. Adolfo and Nix had vanished. One moment they were in the car with me, the next they were gone, melting into the industrial shadows. I was the one walking in the light. "You're the bait," Adolfo had said, his voice flat. "But you're also the key. The main RFID reader at the gate is faulty. We know because Nix made it faulty. You are the technician sent to fix it. While you are running diagnostics, you pull the logs. Everything, go." I approached the guard shack. A thick-set man in a heavy jacket looked up from a racing form, annoyed. "North Star Utilities," I said, my voice steady, holding up the badge. "Got a call about your gate reader. It's been throwing error codes all night." He grunted, "About time. It's been slow for weeks. Go on. Don't touch anything else." He buzzed the electronic lock on the pedestrian gate. I walked to the humming metal box that controlled the main barrier. I knelt, opened the heavy toolkit Nix had packed, and pulled out a small, handheld data retrieval unit. I plugged it into the reader's diagnostic port. This was my world. The system was a mess of corrupted packets and error logs, exactly as Nix had designed. But underneath the digital noise, I saw it, the digital signature, the same fractured checksum logic from Trent's drive. I ran my custom recovery script. My screen flickered, and the data began to assemble, like fitting together the shards of a broken mirror. It was all there, a hidden import-export manifest. Container ID 4A881. Contents, medical equipment, tax status cleared. Container ID 4A882. Contents, pharmaceutical supplies, tax status cleared. The chain went on. Dozens of entries, all marked with fraudulent tax stamps. They were ghosts. They weren't just moving illegal goods. They were moving nothing. They were creating phantom shipments of high-value items, claiming they were importing them, and then claiming tax credits and insurance payouts on cargo that never existed. It was a massive, hollow shell game. I had the whole chain. I fixed the reader, resetting the protocol Nix had broken, and gave the guard a thumbs up. I need to check the internal junction box to confirm the signal. He waved me through, his eyes already back on his magazine. The warehouse itself was cavernous, aisles of containers stacked 6 high. The temperature was a bone-chilling 35 degrees. My breath fogged in the air. "Over here." Adolfo's voice came from the shadows to my left. He was suddenly just there, a darker shape against the steel. He wasn't looking at the containers. He was looking up at a security camera mounted on the ceiling. "Quadrant 4, he murmured, his voice tight. "The camera is pointed at a concrete wall. It's not broken. It's intentional." "A blind spot," I whispered, "so they can load and unload." "So their partners can," he corrected. "The Port Guardians Authority, the inside man Deputy Director Velas, who sent you the money. He's giving them a private doorway." Nix dropped from a gantry above us, landing without a sound. She was a wraith in black tactical gear. She pointed. "Containers 881 and 882, third stack." We moved. The containers looked real, the seals intact, but Adolfo slid a thin piece of metal into the locking mechanism. There was a dull thud, and the seal popped. It was a fake. He swung the heavy door open. We shined our flashlights inside. It was empty. Not a box, not a crate. Just a few dust bunnies and the faint smell of rust. The manifest taped to the door claimed it held $4 million worth of MRI components. "Go shipping," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "They wash the money by buying equipment, ship an empty box, and their man at the port signs off that it arrived. The Alder ring pockets the clean cash." Nix moved past us. She planted a small black disc, a high-frequency audio bug, deep inside the container, then another on the main electrical junction box. "I'm in," she whispered. Adolfo put a single, near-invisible earpiece in. "Bishop, go!" I heard a faint, tinny voice from the earpiece. "Bishop," his voice electronically modulated, sharp and official. "This is Integrity Bureau. We have a signal alert on Channel 6. Confirming a possible data breach at Cold Storage 7. Authenticate. Now." A second voice, panicked and real, crackled over Adolfo's comms. It must have been the Alderring's local man. "What breach?" "There's no breach. It's just a utilities tech. I'm watching her." "The asset is compromised." Bishop's fake voice snapped. "We are initiating a lockdown of the digital treasury. Recite authentication code Delta 90. "No, don't lock it," the man shrieked. "It's Delta 90 Alpha Alpha. The password is Alpha. It's just the girl, don't lock us out." "Authentication confirmed. Stand down," Bishop said. Adolfo looked at Nix. She gave a single, satisfied nod. They had it, the password to the Alderring's offshore accounts. "We're done," Adolfo said. "Nix, wipe our entry from the gate logs. Mara, you're leaving. Walk out the front door, just like you came in." We started moving toward the light of the main entrance. We rounded the last stack, and a figure stumbled out, collapsing in front of us. Mara, don't please." It was Trent. He was a wreck. His face was a map of new bruises. One eye swollen shut, his lips split. The arrogant bully was gone, replaced by a terrified, shivering animal. He saw Adolfo and tried to crawl backward. "Please," he sobbed, holding his hands up. "Please, I'm begging you. They know I lost the card. They know I talked to you. They said I was a loose end. They're going to kill me." He was hyperventilating, his eyes wild with a terror I had never seen, not even in myself. "They're going to put me in one of these boxes. I know how they work. Please, I'll do anything. Oh, get me out of here. I'll disappear. I gave you the card. I helped you." I looked at Adolfo. His face was glacial. He saw Trent as a problem to be solved, a loose thread. I could see the calculation in his eyes. Trent was too much noise. "Adolfo," I said, my voice quiet but sharp. He looked at me. "Look at him," I said, nodding at the weeping man. "He's terrified. He's not lying, and he's the only one who can directly tie the Alderring to the Port Authority. He's the witness." I stared at Adolfo. "Give him a chance. If he cooperates." Adolfo's gaze shifted from me back to Trent. He held the man in that cold, silent regard for a full 10 seconds. Trent's sobs hitched. His breath caught in his throat. "One chance," Adolfo said, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet. "One time." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim, silver data recorder. "Sable prepared this. It's a digital affidavit. You will state your name, your position, and your entire history with the Alderring. You will name every contact at the Port Authority. You will detail the ghost shipping ledger. You will authenticate it with your voice and thumbprint." He tossed the device onto the concrete floor in front of Trent. "You have 5 minutes. You lie or you hold anything back. The device will know, and I will leave you here." Yes, anything." Trent scrambled for the recorder as if it were a life raft. He crawled behind a stack of pallets and began speaking into it, his voice a desperate, hurried whisper. Adolfo's earpiece buzzed. "Bishop," he said. This time, Bishop's voice was his own, unfiltered and urgent. "Boss, we have a fire. That second photo from the pier, the one of you and Mara. It's all over the dark forums. The Alderring is pushing it. But it's not their usual play. Someone else is amplifying it." "Amplifying how?" "The narrative is that you are the extortionist. They're spinning it. North Shore Syndicate uses girl as bait to trap Port Authority officials. They're painting you as the aggressor and Mara as your honey trap. They're trying to start a war, boss, and they're using her as the trigger." My stomach clenched. They were turning me into a weapon against Adolfo. Adolfo stood perfectly still. The cold fury that radiated from him was palpable. He was done being hunted. He was done reacting. They want to use her as a symbol, he said, his voice a low, lethal vibration. Fine, we'll give them one. He looked at me, his eyes burning with a cold fire. Bishop, tell Sable to execute. Release the full dossier. The full one, boss, that's our leverage against all of it. Adolfo cut him off. Release the file proving the Interstate Integrity Bureau is a phantom. Leak the audio of them extorting the shipping lines. Post the fake badges, the corporate shells, everything. They built their power on the lie that they were a legitimate threat. We're going to expose them as frauds. We're not just going to break them. We're going to make them a joke. We will burn their reputation to the ground. He didn't take me back to the dusty attic. He didn't take me to the cold operational center beneath the stage. He drove, his black sedan cutting silently through the rain-slicked, empty streets, to a part of the harbor I barely knew. He parked in a private subterranean garage beneath a sleek, anonymous tower of glass and dark steel. We rode the elevator in silence. It opened directly into a sprawling loft space. Studio Lumen, he called it. It was the complete opposite of the theater, where the Orpheum was old, dusty, and full of shadows. This place was modern, clean, and defined by light. One entire wall was a sheet of glass, floor to ceiling, looking out over the churning black water of the Orpheum River. The city lights were a blurred, glittering skyline in the distance. The rain was a constant, whispering percussion against the massive window. A low, smoky saxophone melody drifted from speakers I couldn't see. There was no one else, no Bishop, no Nix, just him and me and the storm. It was a fortress, a bubble suspended above the war we were about to start. I walked to the window, watching the rain trace paths down the glass. I could feel him, standing in the center of the room, just watching me. The tension from the night, the escape, the confrontation with Trent, the strategic maneuvers was still thrumming in my veins. But here, it felt different, contained. I have to tell you something, I said, my voice quiet, my reflection staring back at me from the dark glass. It's embarrassing. I heard him move, the soft sound of a glass being placed on a stone countertop. He was giving me the silence to speak. All my life, I began, still looking at the rain, I've believed that strong men just take. That's what they do. Trent, the men on the docks. Power was about control, about not asking, about just deciding what they wanted and taking it, and you just had to live with it. I thought it was a rule, like gravity. I turned around to face him. He was standing by the minimalist kitchen island, his jacket off, his tie loosened, the shadows in the loft carved his face, making him look like he was chiseled from the same stone as the counter. But you, I struggled for the words, you are the most powerful, the most dangerous man I have ever met, and you keep asking. A flicker of confusion in his steel eyes. I have never asked you for anything, Mara. You do, I insisted, taking a half step toward him. You ask all the time, in the attic. Before you kissed me. You stopped. You waited. You asked with silence. You gave me the space to say no, and I know you would have accepted it. You would have just stopped. I have never had that before. The power to say no. He held my gaze, and the air between us grew thick, heavy. He understood what I was confessing. It wasn't just about him, it was about the cage I had lived in. He moved then, walking around the island, crossing the dark wooden floor until he stood in front of me. He didn't crowd me, but he was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. The world shrank to the space between us, the sound of the saxophone, the rhythm of the rain. He stopped, a foot away, his eyes dark and intense, searched mine. There it was again, the silent question. May I? My heart was a fist, beating against my ribs. I was done being afraid. I was done waiting. I gave him my answer. I nodded, a small, definite movement. His hand came up, so slowly, as if not to startle me. His fingers were warm as they brushed my cheek, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. It was a touch that was impossibly gentle, a stark contrast to the power I knew he held. "Mara," he whispered. My name was a rough, low sound, a prayer or a promise. He leaned in, and his lips brushed mine. It was a faint touch, as soft as it had been in the attic, a reacquaintance. But this time, I didn't wait. I met the kiss, leaning into his warmth. The dam broke, the gentle pressure became firm, and the warmth became a fire. His other hand came to my waist, his fingers splaying, pulling me against him. I felt the solid wall of his chest, the strength he held in check. I slid my hands up his shoulders, gripping the fine cotton of his shirt. His suit jacket, the one from the alley, was still on a chair. I didn't care. I pulled at his arms, kneading him closer. He shrugged off his suit jacket, letting it fall unheeded to the floor between us. The last piece of his armor was gone. His arms wrapped around me completely, one hand moving to the small of my back, the other cradling my head, his fingers lost in my hair. He held me as if I were the only anchor in the storm. The kiss deepened, and it was no longer a question. It was an answer. It was slow and deep and thorough, and it left no room for fear. It was just the taste of him, the scent of the rain, and the low thrum of the jazz that seemed to be pulsing in time with my blood. I felt his breathing hitch, a ragged edge to his iron control. I pulled back just enough to breathe, my forehead resting against his. I was the one who moved first, tugging him by the hand. He laughed, a low, husky sound that vibrated through my chest. He kissed my forehead, my temple, the corner of my eye, a slow waltz of possession and trust, as if mapping my face by touch. We stumbled, a slow-motion fall onto the low, deep sofa that faced the window. The city lights blurred into a galaxy behind his head. He caught himself on his arms, his body braced above mine, his weight held back, his strength a canopy over me. He was still giving me that space, even now. I looked up at him, at the intensity in his dark eyes, at the way the light caught the strands of hair falling over his forehead. This was real. I reached up, my hand trembling slightly, and laced my fingers through his. His hand engulfed mine, his grip strong, his skin warm. We stayed there, suspended in the amber light. The saxophone hit a low, soulful note. Our hearts hammered out a matched, frantic rhythm against the steady drum of the rain on the glass. The night closed in. The world beyond the window dissolved, and there was nothing else. I woke to the smell of strong coffee and the sharp, gray light of dawn. The rain had finally stopped. I was tangled in an impossibly soft cashmere blanket on the sofa. For a second, I was disoriented. Then I saw him. He was standing at the kitchen counter, his back to me. He was wearing the same dark trousers, but he'd put on a fresh, crisp white shirt. The sleeves rolled up his forearms. He was pouring coffee into 2 familiar ceramic mugs. I sat up, the blanket pooling in my lap. My clothes were neatly folded on a nearby chair, but on the arm of the sofa, where he must have left it, was his black shirt from the night before. I picked it up, pulled it on. It was huge, the hem falling to my knees, and it smelled of him. He turned, holding the mugs. He saw me, standing there, small and lost in his shirt. A slow, genuine smile transformed his face, erasing the shadows, the steel. "Good morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. He handed me a mug. "I'm marking my territory," I said, my voice just as husky. His smile widened. "Is that so?" He leaned in, and I expected another deep kiss, but he just pressed his lips to my forehead, a gesture of profound, gentle ownership. A phone buzzed on the counter. He picked it up, his expression shifting as he read the screen. The commander was back. "Nix," he said, his voice all business. "The dossier is ready. She's recommending we publish in 30 minutes. The cold, hard reality of the day rushed in. The Alder ring, the smear campaign, the fight. He looked at me, his eyes now clear and focused. He reached out, his thumb brushing the corner of my eye. It was a silent promise. "You are safe." I reached for his hand, the one holding the phone. My fingers traced the line of his wrist, and I felt it, a thick, raised ridge of scar tissue, just beneath the cuff. It was old, but it was severe. I looked up at him, my question unspoken. He didn't pull away. His gaze went distant just for a second, looking at something far beyond the window. A reminder, he said, his voice flat, from a long time ago. A reminder of what happens when you trust the wrong people, and what it costs to protect what is yours. He didn't elaborate, and he didn't glamorize it. It was a fact, carved into his skin. I met his gaze, and I understood. He was a shield, forged in a fire I couldn't imagine. We win, I said, my voice steady, but we win without becoming them. We have to win without losing who we are. His gaze locked with mine. He gave a single, slow nod. We save the innocent first. It's the only rule. We didn't stay in the sanctuary of the loft. The 30 minutes were up. We were back in the lantern, the cold, concrete heart of the theater, and the air was humming with a tension I could taste. It was the silence of an army on a hill, watching the enemy advance, knowing the cannons were about to fire. Sable was at the main terminal, her expression severe. The dossier is packaged. Trent's digitized and authenticated affidavit is embedded. We are ready to publish. Go, Adolfo said. Sable's fingers moved, and the war began. It's live, she announced, her voice flat, on the main screen. The logo of the Interstate Integrity Bureau materialized, only for a heavy, red digital stamp to slam down over it, fraud. The file spread like a virus. It wasn't just on the dark web forums. Sable was pushing it to legitimate shipping news outlets, insurance underwriters, and trade regulators. It included everything: the Shell Corporation paperwork, the fake badges, the audio of them extorting a dock manager, and the centerpiece. Trent's terrified. Detailed confession. It named Deputy Director Vilas. It named the ghost shipping route. It named the Alder Ring. The Port Guardians Authority internal network is in total chaos, Nix said, her eyes scanning a dozen scrolling data feeds. Velas is trying to purge the servers, but he's a decade too late. And, Cade added, a rare, thin smile on his lips, the Maritime Arbitration Bureau for District 11 just received an anonymous, encrypted tip. They are demanding an immediate emergency audit of all PTA financials, effective immediately. You, I whispered, looking at Cade. The audit is a fiction, of course, Cade said smoothly. The Bureau is real, but the demand is ours. But the Port Authority doesn't know that. They are legally frozen, which means all of Alder Ring's payment channels just dried up, Adolfo finished. It was a brilliant move. They hadn't just punched the Alder Ring. They had cut off their oxygen. The counterattack was fast and clumsy, born of pure desperation. Incoming, Bishop growled from his station. They're pushing back. It's loud. A new image flooded the monitors. It was the photo from the harbor, the one of Adolfo and me, his hands on my face. But this one was new. Sharper, taken by the man with the overbright flash. My face was circled in red. They're spinning our narrative, Sable said, her voice laced with disgust. The caption reads, Mara Ellison, Taranova's bagman. She collects the extortion money. She's the one who holds the accounts. And then, below it, a line that made my blood freeze. $10,000 for her recovery, alive. A bounty. They had put a bounty on my head. I felt the blood drain from my face. I took an involuntary step back, into the shadows of the server racks. Bishop saw the movement. Boss, Bishop said, standing up. We have to move her. The loft is compromised. Every freelance gun in the city will be looking for her. I have a safe house in the Narrows. No. Adolfo's voice was quiet, but it cut through the hum of the computers. He hadn't moved. He turned to me, his face an impassive mask, but his eyes were like burning coals. He walked into the shadows where I was hiding. He didn't grab me. He simply placed his hand on the small of my back, a solid, immovable point of contact. He guided me back out into the center of the room, under the harsh white light of the monitors, in full view of his entire command staff. He looked at Bishop, then at Nix, then at Sable. His voice was low, but it was an iron decree that filled every corner of the concrete room. She is a non-combatant zone. He wasn't speaking to the enemy. He was speaking to his own people. He was not hiding me. He was not treating me as a liability. He was making a statement. I was not a piece in his game. I was the reason he was playing. A profound, steely calm settled over me. The fear didn't vanish, but it crystallized into purpose. "While they're busy posting pictures," Adolfo said, turning back to the map, "we will take away their physical assets. Bishop." Bishop nodded, his focus snapping back. "I'm pushing the ghost container manifest the full chain that Mara recovered to a public bill of lading tracker. Every competitor Alder Ring ever cheated, every insurance firm, and more importantly, our contacts at the real customs bureaus just saw the hole at Pier 19. And they'll have to lock it down," I said. "Already done," Nix confirmed, a new alert flashing. Pier 19 is officially frozen by the PTA itself, pending an internal investigation. No one in, no one out. "They are trapped," Adolfo said. "Now, we take their money." "Trent's confession was quite thorough once he started," Cade said, spinning his chair. "He gave us the location of their digital treasury. The primary server isn't on the pier. It's in the sub-basement of the Halberd Private Library." "A library?" I asked. "The perfect cover," Adolfo murmured. "Quiet, secure, and requires a high level of access. They've been trying to move their digital assets ever since Sable's leak hit," Cade continued. "But I anticipated that." He brought up a complex schematic of cryptocurrency wallets. "I implemented a false KYC, a Know Your Customer verification tripwire. Every time they tried to transfer more than $1,000, the system automatically froze the transaction, demanding identity verification. And they fell for it." "Desperate people do stupid things," Cade said. "To unlock their funds, they had to upload verification. They used their backup documents, fake passports, shell company incorporation papers, all of which were traceable to a single, very real arms dealer in the Eastern Bloc. We now know who's funding them, and we know who they're buying their weapons from. Their entire supply line is now in our hands." They had been suffocated, blinded, and disarmed, all in less than an hour, all with data. But I was staring at the map. "The library," I said, pointing. "Where is it exactly?" "Nix overlaid the city grid, 3 blocks inland from Pier 19. My mind raced. The pier, the library, the street art night. "Nix," I said, my voice urgent, "bring up the tag map, the one you made from the art event, the one I helped you paint." She overlaid the spray paint symbols onto the schematic. It was a perfect match. "You tagged their escape routes," I said, tracing a line on the screen with my finger. "You tagged the storm drains, the gantry ladders, the sewer access points, but look." I pointed to a blank spot. "There's a black hole, a utility main that just stops. It starts at the main service bay at Pier 19. Nix's fingers flew across the keyboard. She brought up the original city blueprints. Her eyes widened. "It doesn't stop. It connects. It runs directly underneath the Halberd Library." I looked at Adolfo. "It's not just a server room. It's their escape hatch. The pier is frozen. They can't get out by sea. The head of the snake, Argent Wolf, he'll be there. He'll use that tunnel to get to the library, wipe the servers clean, and disappear." A dead silence fell over the room. We had them trapped, but the evidence, the original hardware, was about to be destroyed. Adolfo stood, absorbing it. He had the calm of a man standing in the eye of a hurricane. "A 2-pronged attack," he announced. "Nix, take your team. I want that tunnel collapsed. Choke points at both ends. No one gets in or out. Bishop, you have Overwatch. Cade, you sever their connection to the arms dealer. Now." "And the library, boss?" Bishop asked. "Wolf will be there. He'll have his own guards. He'll torch that server the second he hears us." "My copy of the data is fragmented," I said, my voice low. "Trent's confession is good, but it's just one man's word. We need the server. We need the original hard drive. Adolfo nodded once. We need the hardware. He turned and picked up his jacket, the one he'd worn to the loft. He started putting it on. Boss, Nix said, confused. I'm going in, Adolfo stated. He looked directly at me. And Mara comes with me. She's the only one who can bypass their security protocols and clone that drive before Wolf can destroy it. My heart didn't just stop. It fell. He wasn't shielding me anymore. He was drafting me. Sable stepped forward, her face pale, her professional calm finally cracking. Adolfo, that is madness. The bounty is on her. Your face is all over their network. If you walk into that library, you are not walking into a trap. You are walking into a kill box. They will focus every gun they have left directly on you. Adolfo finished buttoning his jacket. He adjusted his cuffs, a small, precise movement. He looked at Sable, his eyes cold, clear, and absolutely final. Good, he said. That will keep them from shooting at anyone else. The Halberd Private Library was a mausoleum. The air was dead, thick with the dry, sweet smell of decaying paper and old leather. We didn't use the front entrance. A service door in the alley clicked open as we approached, Nix's invisible hand, and we slipped inside. The only light came from the emergency fixtures, casting a sickly, flickering red glow over the endless stacks. It painted the hallways in repeating snapshots of blood. Adolfo moved a half step ahead of me, a shadow in the darkness. His hands were empty, relaxed at his sides. He moved with a terrifying, fluid grace, his eyes scanning every alcove, every gantry above. He was a panther in a cage, and he owned it. We reached a dead end in the cartography wing, a towering shelf of antique maps. This is it, I whispered. The blueprints showed a sub-basement access. Adolfo stepped back. He didn't crowd me, didn't tell me how to do my job. He ceded the space, his gaze sweeping the corridor behind us, trusting me implicitly. I ran my fingers along the ornate oak frame, feeling for the seam. It wasn't a lock, it was a pressure plate, hidden in the carving of a sea serpent. I pushed, a low hydraulic hiss, and the entire 2-ton bookshelf slid sideways, revealing a dark steel staircase plunging into the earth. The smell of old paper vanished, replaced by the cold, sterile hum of high-end electronics. The basement was a shock. It was a pristine, white, clinical box, a server farm hidden beneath a century of rot. Racks of servers blinked with cool blue and green lights, their fans a steady, throbbing drone. He'll have a dead man's switch, Adolfo said, his voice a low rumble, a thermite charge. We can't just unplug it. I nodded, my hands already moving. I pulled out my data cloning drive, the heavy-duty device Bishop had called the sandwich. I'm not unplugging it, I'm copying it. I found the main server rack and jacked my device into the diagnostic port. The screen lit up. I was in. The progress bar began to crawl across the screen, 1%. This is a petabyte of data, I whispered, my heart hammering. This isn't a ledger, it's an archive. I need time. While the drive copied, I couldn't just stand. I opened the active access logs, my fingers flying. I had to see who was connected. Local access, remote connection. My blood went cold. IP address 144.22, port AUTAs, remote user D, Velas. Adolfo, I breathed. Velas, he's in the system right now. He's not just there, mole. He's actively watching. Before he could answer, a klaxon erupted, a deafening, skull-splitting wail that shook the concrete floor. The cool blue lights died, replaced by the same frantic flashing red strobes from upstairs. They're here, Adolfo said, his voice dangerously calm. He didn't move toward me. He moved toward the only other exit, a heavy, fireproof door that led to the service tunnel. Nix, cut them off. The steel door buzzed, the magnetic lock failing, and it burst open. 2 men in dark gear stormed in, weapons raised. Then, thud. Absolute darkness, The klaxon, the fans, the lights, every source of power in the room was cut. The only light was the faint green glow of my cloning drive's battery. "Tunnel power is severed." Nix's voice crackled in Adolfo's earpiece. "I've trapped the lead team. The rest are stuck in the dark." The two men who had entered were disoriented, blinded. "What the hell? Where's the—" Adolfo moved. It wasn't a fight. It was a removal. I saw his silhouette move twice in the red flashes of the still active fire alarm. Two precise, heavy sounds. Two bodies hitting the floor. The main lights flickered back on, but only to a dim, emergency level. A man stood in the tunnel doorway. It wasn't a thug. He was tall, dressed in an immaculate gray suit, and he held a slim, silver pistol aimed directly at Adolfo's heart. Another man stood beside him, holding up a smartphone, its camera light glaring. "We're live, Terranova," the man in the suit said, his voice smooth and amused. "Argent Wolf. The whole dark web community is watching. They're all here to see the monster of the North Shore, Adolfo Terranova, barge into a private facility and execute me in cold blood. Make your move." Adolfo hadn't moved an inch. He stood with his hands still at his sides, his body angled to shield me. "We are live, Wolf," Adolfo replied, his voice a low, conversational rumble. "And they are all watching you point a gun at a civilian." He nodded his head toward me. "Are you really going to shoot a woman on a live feed?" Wolf's eyes flickered to me, then to my drive, still humming, still copying. He saw the progress bar, 57%. "The girl is the thief," he snarled, his composure cracking. He knew he'd lost. If I can't have it, no one can. He raised his other hand and slammed a red panic button on the wall. A new sound joined the alarm, a high-pitched, electronic whine. "Self-destruct sequence initiated. Thermite charge will detonate in 10 seconds. "It's over," Wolf shrieked, his gun still steady on Adolfo. I ignored the gun. I ignored the men. I stared at the server. The whine was coming from the power supply. He was going to fry the core. 9, 8. I ripped my cloning drive out. The copy was incomplete. Useless. I needed the core. 7. "Mara, no," Adolfo yelled, tensing to move. "Stay still," Wolf screamed at him. 6, 5. I grabbed a heavy, long-necked screwdriver from my toolkit. I saw the auxiliary battery line, a thick, shielded cable. 4. I jammed the metal shaft of the screwdriver deep into the port, shorting the entire system. A deafening bang, a shower of brilliant blue sparks. The high-pitched whine died, the lights, the alarms, everything went dead. We were plunged back into the flashing red strobes. I saw Wolf's face, a mask of pure fury. He turned his gun from Adolfo. He turned it toward me. "You bitch." Adolfo moved. He didn't have a gun. Something small and black was in his hand. It flashed, spinning through the air. It was a knife. It struck Wolf's wrist with a wet, heavy thud. The silver pistol clattered to the floor. Wolf screamed, a high, thin sound, clutching his hand as blood poured between his fingers. The cameraman was still filming, his hands shaking violently. "Keep rolling," Adolfo commanded him. "Get all of it, nay." "Got the feed, boss." Bishop's voice came over the comms. "Rerouting it now." On the cameraman's phone, the live feed of Wolf's bleeding face suddenly cut out. It was replaced by the image of the Interstate Integrity Bureau logo, with the word fraud stamped across it in red. Then it cut to Trent's tearful, watermarked confession. Then it cut to the server log D, Velas active connection. The live chat on the side of the stream, which had been cheering for a fight, exploded. "Velas, he's working with the Port Authority. Wolf is a rat. It's a setup. Terranova was right." The entire underworld narrative flipped in a single second. Shut it down, Wolf shrieked, but it was too late. The heavy door to the staircase, the one we'd used to enter, burst open. It wasn't Alderring. It was 6 men in full, black tactical armor, Port Guardians Authority in white letters on their chests. They fanned out, their rifles aimed with cold, professional precision. Leading them, his face pale and slick with sweat, his hand on his sidearm, was Deputy Director Velas. He saw Wolf bleeding on the ground. He saw me, holding the server drive. He saw Adolfo, standing, hands empty, in a sea of his own making. The trap snapped shut. "Adolfo Terranova," Velas yelled, his voice cracking with panic and authority. "You are under arrest for assault on a federal officer, for destruction of property, for domestic terrorism. Hands on your head. Hands on your head, now." The 6 rifles centered on Adolfo's chest. We were boxed in. Wolf's men were in the tunnel. Velas's men were on the stairs. There was no exit. Adolfo took a small step, pushing me back toward the cover of the server racks. He was planting himself between me and the guns, again. "I'll hold the door," he whispered, his back to me, his eyes locked on Velas. "You have the core. Go, the tunnel. Nix will find you." He was going to sacrifice himself. He was going to let them take him. Or worse, just so I could get away. I clutched the server's core, the real, physical evidence to my chest. He thought I was the civilian. He thought I was the one to be protected. He was wrong. I shook my head, my voice low, as cold and steady as his. "No. We go." He was going to die for me. He was going to stand there and let 6 tactical rifles tear him apart, just to give me a chance to run. "No," I said again, my voice like ice. "We go." Before he could argue, I grabbed my mini UV flashlight from my toolkit. I wasn't just a painter. I was a data recovery expert. I knew invisible ink. I knew Nix. I clicked it on. The concrete floor, which had looked bare, exploded in a secret language of light. The waving knot pattern I had painted at the pier, the one I thought was just for tagging watchers, was everywhere. It was a brilliant, glowing blue map, snaking across the floor, bypassing the tactical team and pointing directly at the massive antique map cabinet on the far wall. "The cartography wing," I breathed. "It's the other exit." Adolfo didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed my arm. "Bishop Nix, on Mara, we are moving." "Velas, don't let them!" Wolf shrieked from the floor. "Fire, fire," Velas commanded. The world erupted. The thwack, thwack, thwack of rubber bullets was deafening. Adolfo shoved me forward, spinning, his back taking the full force of the assault. I heard him grunt, a sharp, pained sound as the heavy slugs hammered into his body. But he didn't slow down. He was a human shield, an iron wall moving through the chaos. We hit the stairwell. A deep hiss came from below. The server room we had just left vanished in a cloud of roiling, silver smoke. It poured up the stairs, thick and choking, reflecting the red emergency lights. "Silver nitrate," Adolfo coughed, pulling me up the last few steps. "Nix, blinding the cameras." We burst out of the library's main floor and into the subterranean garage. The air was cold, smelling of old exhaust and concrete. The exit ramp was 50 yards away. Freedom. Headlights flashed on, blinding us. An engine roared. A heavy, armored Port Authority SUV skidded across the concrete, blocking the ramp completely. The door flew open, and Deputy Director Velas stepped out, his face pale and slick with sweat. He must have used a different exit. He had his sidearm out, aimed steadily at us. "It's over, Terranova," he yelled, his voice echoing. "You are boxed in nowhere, left to run." A shape stumbled out of the library door behind us. It was Argent Wolf, clutching his bloody hand, his gray suit ruined. He was unhinged, his eyes wild. He saw Velas, his only ally, standing there with a gun. "Velas!" Wolf screamed, his voice cracking. "You traitor! You left me! You set me up!" Beside him, the cameraman was still faithfully filming, the dark web feed capturing every second of the implosion. "Shut that camera off!" Velas shrieked at him. "You shut me down!" Wolf roared. He was completely broken. He raised his other hand. He had a second, smaller pistol and ankle gun. He fired a wild, frantic shot. Crack! Velas grunted. He looked down at his own chest. A dark, rapidly spreading stain appeared on his white shirt. He looked up. his eyes wide with a look of pure, stupid surprise. He staggered, then collapsed onto the concrete, his own gun clattering beside him. Wolf froze. He had just shot his high-level government contact, his only escape route, live, in front of the entire underworld, the dark web feed, which Bishop was monitoring, instantly turned on him. He was a pariah, a fool. "Sable," Adolfo said, his voice low, speaking into his cuff. "Now." It was the final move. The checkmate, Sable, at that exact moment, would be releasing the final dossier, the illegal contracts, Velas's private bank transfers, the logs of his coordination with Wolf directly to the Internal Affairs Board of District Court 14. The tactical team, still on the stairs, heard their radios crackle to life. A new, authoritative voice cut through the static. "All Port Authority units, stand down immediately by order of the Maritime Arbitration Bureau. District 14 has jurisdiction. All PTA personnel are to withdraw. I repeat, withdraw now." The tactical team looked at Velas bleeding on the ground, at us, at the new authority on their radios. Their orders were gone. Their command was broken. Confused and leaderless, they began a tactical retreat, vanishing back into the library. It was over. It was just us and Wolf. Adolfo took a single, slow step toward him. "It's done, Wolf." Wolf was breathing in harsh, ragged gasps. He was an animal, cornered, bleeding, with nothing left. I watched his eyes. They weren't looking at Adolfo's face. They were looking at his back. He was going to take Adolfo with him. He raised his pistol, his good hand shaking, aiming for Adolfo's spine. "Adolfo," I screamed. I didn't have time to think. I had the real server core, the chip I'd pulled in my left hand, tucked against my body. I had the heavy, empty sandwich cloning drive in my right. I threw the empty drive. I hurled it straight at Wolf's head. "Here you want it. Take it." It was a stupid, desperate move, but it worked. He flinched, instinctively turning his head as the drive clattered uselessly against the wall. That fraction of a second was all I needed. I launched myself at him. I wasn't strong enough to stop him, but I didn't need to be. I slammed my shoulder into his gun arm, knocking his aim wide. The gun fired. The sound was a deafening cannon in the garage, the bullet ricocheting harmlessly off a concrete pillar. Before Wolf could even register what had happened, Adolfo was on him. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. 3 precise, brutal movements. 1. His hand seized Wolf's wrist, twisting. 2. A sickening snap of bone, and the gun fell. 3. His other hand open struck Wolf's throat. Wolf collapsed, choking, silenced. In the sudden, ringing quiet, a new sound emerged. Sirens. Not police. These were heavy, low frequency. Black sedans, official but unmarked, swept down the garage ramp. Men in dark, flawless suits stepped out. Maritime Arbitration Bureau. Cade's final move. He hadn't just bought us time. He'd sent the cavalry. They were the fictional authority Sable had leaked the audit to, now made real by Cade's legal maneuvering. They were here to seize the assets. And Wolf was asset number 1. As they cuffed Wolf, and as a separate medical team began working frantically on Velas, Adolfo touched my elbow. "We go," he murmured. "Now, before they start asking questions." He wanted to disappear, to fade back into the shadows, his world. I looked at the server core in my hand, the truth. I looked at the arbitrators bagging evidence. I looked at the cameraman, who was still filming, his feed now a public record. "No," I said. My voice was steady. "We're done with the shadows. We're done hiding." I pulled away from him and walked forward, straight into the light of the camera. "My name is Mara Ellison," I said, my voice ringing in the concrete space. "I am a data recovery specialist. This," I held up the server core, "is the original, uncorrupted hard drive from the Alder Ring server. I am handing it over to the Maritime Arbitration Bureau." I placed it in the lead arbitrator's astonished hand, and I am retaining a public copy. Adolfo moved, standing at my shoulder. He understood. He put his hand on the small of my back, a solid, immovable claim. He was with me, in the light. He looked at the camera, addressing the entire underworld, the arbitrators, and the city itself. The Interstate Integrity Bureau was a fraud, he stated, his voice calm and clear as a bell. It was run by Argent Wolf and facilitated by Deputy Director Vilas. They targeted civilians. They broke the code. He looked straight into the lens, his steel eyes cold. My organization does not tolerate those who prey on the innocent. Miss Ellison was targeted. She is, and she will remain under my protection. The North Shore honors the line. Today, the Alder Ring crossed it. This is the result. A new respect, cold and hard, settled over the feed. He hadn't lied. He just enforced the rules. As the arbitrators led Wolf away, and as Vilas was wheeled out on a stretcher, a cuff already on his wrist, I saw movement by the ramp. Trent. He was standing in the shadows, clean. His bruises faded. He looked at me, at Adolfo beside me, at the scene. He gave one single nod, atonement, and then he was gone, disappearing into the city, Freya. The night was finally quiet. The city was breathing again. We were on the roof of Studio Lumen, the air sharp and clean after the rain. The harbor lights glittered below, no longer flashing red. I was leaning against Adolfo's chest, his arms wrapped around me, his warmth a solid, living thing. "Do you regret it?" he asked, his voice a low rumble against my ear. "Regret what, getting shot at or getting your suit covered in silver nitrate?" I felt his chest move as he smiled. "Pretending," he said. "That night at the Vellum, grabbing a total stranger, starting all of this." I tilted my head back, looking up at the strong line of his jaw. "No," I whispered. "I only have one regret." "What's that?" "That I didn't tell you the truth sooner. That night in the attic." I turned to face him, meeting his intense, steel-gray gaze. "I told you I didn't want to pretend anymore. That was the truth. I just wish I'd said it sooner." He didn't speak. He didn't ask. He just lowered his head. He kissed me. It wasn't the tentative, exploratory kiss of the attic. It wasn't the frantic, desperate kiss of the night before. It was a kiss that was slow and deep and sure. It was a kiss that meant we were done running. It was the end of the lie, the beginning of the truth. Thank you so much for listening to our story. I would love to know where in the world you are tuning in from. Please, leave a comment below to say hello and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. It would also mean the world to us if you supported the story by hitting the hype button, so more people can find and enjoy this journey.